Welcome into the show, ladies and gentlemen. Rockets lose a tough one, 133 to 125 in Utah tonight. That was surprising in some ways. I'll just say that Rockets fell behind big early, didn't have the juice, let's just say, and basically they fall. They nearly overcome a 21-point deficit, mainly behind guys like Şengün and KD in the fourth quarter, and surprisingly, Jae'Sean Tate giving this team a burst. But it just wasn't enough. 133 to 125 Rockets fall in Utah. I'm here with Ben. Ben, it really took until game 18 for the Rockets to lay an egg, so to speak, to sort of be like, where did this come from? But that's kind of what this game was.
Well, and it also took until game 18 for them to have their first night two of a back-to-back. And that is something that is a red flag for me moving forward. We'll see how they handle it. They have another opportunity this weekend. This is a stretch we mentioned going into this week with 5 games in 7 days. But I think the Rockets have 13 back-to-backs for the season. They hadn't had any until now, December 1st. So they're going to be coming up, especially in the second half of the season. And especially the way they are right now without Tari Eason, without Dorian Finney-Smith. Of course, they don't have Fred VanVleet for at least the regular season, we suspect. So they're shorthanded to begin with. Their best player is 37 years old. Steven Adams is going to be load managed throughout the regular season, you would expect. So this is a team that, I mentioned on yesterday's show that the glass half full view for the Rockets is that as good as they've been, their strength of schedule was number 4 in the NBA going into this Jazz back-to-back, and the rest of the season was number 30. Well, the glass half empty, the pushback, and a couple of people pointed this out to me on social media the last few days, was do those metrics include back-to-backs? And they don't. The strength of schedule metrics are solely based on who you play, the records, and home versus away. And so the Rockets have played a lot of tough teams to start the year. They've played a lot of road games. They had not had any back-to-backs. And on paper, now maybe this will improve as the season progresses and they get Tari Eason back. We hope Dorian Finney-Smith. We'll see what Steven Adams' availability is moving forward. But on paper, this is a team that you do worry about a little bit on back-to-backs. Are they going to have the juice? Maybe this was a little bit worse because there is some altitude playing in Salt Lake City, but that's where this game was lost. They came out lethargic. They built a 21-point deficit. They got within 1 in the fourth quarter. I like that they fought. You mentioned Jae'Sean Tate. Would he and Aaron Holiday enter the game in the second half? That sort of turned the momentum. KD and Şengün, I thought they showed a lot of heart and continued to play hard, even on a night where it felt like the Rockets had so many shots that were short from three-point range. But, yeah, at the end of the day, if you're down 21 points with 14 minutes left in the game, it's going to be really hard no matter who you play, and it caught up with them tonight. And I just think going forward, it's easy to chalk it up as one of those games because all in all it was. There's nothing about tonight that is super concerning or something that should be replicated other than the reasons that I think a lot of those shots were short, the reason the defense for the first 34 minutes was a little lethargic. You do have to worry about, at least until they get more bodies back, is this going to continue? Because for me, this was a classic, the first half of this game, it felt like they were sort of in mud. And so it would have been a classic, put Tari Eason in there and let him create some chaos. Well, there's no Tari Eason. And so until they get whole, and maybe even when they do, because, Kevin Durant is 37 years old, I do worry about how they're going to handle back-to-backs. And I think that's a valid concern moving forward.
Yeah, we're probably going to end up talking for most of the time tonight just about the different issues. I don't think we'll go like the full 30 minutes tonight, but I want to get this out of the way first. Şengün was really efficient offensively, especially came on strong in the third quarter when the Rockets were down big and kind of was the offensive spark for the team. Really, it was Tate that kind of 5 offensive rebounds coming in a night when what was so surprising about this game was you look up and the Rockets are getting crushed on the glass by a team that's pretty good rebounding, certainly, but you don't, as you mentioned, you don't have Steven Adams.
Rockets were plus 17 yesterday, by the way.
Yeah. So it's really, and boy, another contrast is Keontae George, 0 points to, I think he had 28 tonight. Yeah. It was really, really interesting to see how kind of lethargic and they were not that bad. They were not that inefficient offensively. Şengün hit 10 of his first 13 shots. And even with him doing that, the Rockets were down 19 points, 20 points at that point. It was the rebounding and the inefficient 3-point shooting, I think, that were the biggest culprits.
Well, and Keontae George going for 28 and 8 after yesterday going scoreless and having 8 turnovers, people are going to look at the guy across from him, which for a lot of possessions is Reed Shepherd. And we should also note that Reed got benched and did not play in the fourth quarter. And so you'll see people put 2 and 2 together and say, wow, was this a bad game for Reed? And it was. I thought Reed, despite being just 21 years old, year two, he also looked not quite himself. A lot of his open threes were short. But I also think that this was a product of the team as a whole just not having the juice, because with Reed Shepherd, especially year two at his size, there's going to be some vulnerabilities, and you have to hope, especially when he's alongside the other starters, that the collective length and IQ is going to be able, from those other 4 guys, to help overcome whatever deficiencies there are in Reed Shepherd when he gambles and gets out of position. I think on Sunday, well, for starters, Reed had 6 stocks, so a lot of those gambles paid off. Mm-hmm. But when they didn't, the Rockets were flying around. They hadn't played since Wednesday, and so those other 4 guys were able to overcome them. Tonight, the gambles weren't paying off, but I also think the other 4 guys didn't have the juice, and so the issues got compounded. And so that's not meant to say that Reed played well. He absolutely did not, but I think it's sort of a confluence of Reed wasn't himself, but when the collective juice isn't there from the other 4 guys, it's going to look really ugly, because Reed is undersized. He's year two. He's 21 years old. And when you combine that with the Rockets defense that, the first half of the game, they gave up 68 points. When they were down 21 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, the Jazz had 98 points. That's a poor effort all the way around. And to the Rockets' credit, they showed a lot of fight. It would have been easy for the Rockets to say, not our night, and just, accepted the L, and they didn't. They fought back. They got back to within 1, but ultimately, when you're fighting back from 21 down, like, too many things have to go right for you to win most of the time, and that's what they ultimately found out tonight.
Yeah, with Reed Shepherd, we've talked about this a lot off and on. And Reed has been special offensively lately, so we have to balance this with what we're going to, what I'm about to say. Certainly, he can be so good offensively that you're going to overlook some of this stuff. But tonight, it was just over and over and over again. I usually do clips and I don't share them because I'm not going to, I know how some people can be about, oh, why are you posting a negative clip about this guy or that guy? But Reed had just several instances tonight where he was smoked, just direct on-ball defense. There was one where he gambled and the guy just spun right around him and left Şengün on a 2-on-1. They scored easily over Şengün. And it's all because he couldn't, keep that guy in front of him. The on-ball defensive issues are real, but he can look like a special defensive player because those gambles look amazing. Yeah. And he's got great hands and playing off-ball, and he can be terrific. And I think he will get better on ball, but that's just something that they're going to have to figure out tonight. I just think it stuck out. It's interesting. He was +2 in the box tonight, but yeah, as you pointed out, Ime needed a defensive spark because they were getting burned pretty badly there, and we didn't see Reed in the entire fourth as a result.
And by the way, there's a lot of comments in the chat about what happened down the stretch of that game with the Rockets getting very foul prone, and some people are questioning the officials. Other people are wondering if the Rockets fouled because they're tired. It could be that, but I think the bigger takeaway is that when you're trying to overcome a big deficit like that, there's a tendency to play too hard. And you're also going to have to expend a lot of energy in the comeback. And I say that a lot. If you watch the NBA or even college basketball on a frequent basis, the reason that a lot of these big comeback bids don't actually get over the finish line, you use so much energy coming back from 15, 20 down that you aren't able to have that finishing kick because you've had to use so much just to get back into the game. And so I think there's a little bit of that, but there's also sort of just a human nature component that when you're trying to overcome that big deficit, there was a big play late in the game where I thought Amen tried to go for the home run steal. He missed, and Lauri Markkanen got a wide open mid-range shot to push it back to 6. And it was frustrating. I don't know that Amen was necessarily tired. I think it's that he felt like that he needed to make one of those Amen Thompson type takeover plays, and it just didn't happen. He was a fraction of a second late, and the result is the mid-range shot. But I think that just happens when subconsciously that you're trying to flip a game, you're trying to completely turn the momentum. And so what I think this comes down to is don't fall behind by 21 points where you have to, outscore the other team by 21 or 22 or more over the final 14 minutes to win. That's really hard to do physically and also emotionally. I think that's the story. I wouldn't make I wouldn't make too big of a deal out of anything that happened in the fourth quarter. I think the biggest storyline here is that the Rockets built a 21-point deficit against a team that they should never have been down 21 points to. No disrespect to the Jazz, but they're 7-13 for a reason.
Yeah, Şengün, best player for the Rockets tonight, 31 points. I should mention the 14 assists. He had 10, I believe it was 10 by halftime, might have been 9, and 8 rebounds. Really good offensive game, certainly for Şengün. Kevin Durant, it's really interesting. Late in the third, Ryan Hollins broadcasting said, how good has he been, Kevin Durant, referring to this game. And I'm like, he's 6 of 19 with 5 turnovers at this point. He really was pretty inefficient until the fourth quarter when he came alive. I believe he hit 4 of 6 shots. Was a big factor in the Rockets getting close. They cut it to 1, then a couple of threes by the Jazz kind of put it out of reach the rest of the way. But 32 points led the team in scoring for KD, 10 of 25 shooting. Yeah, this Jabari, it should be noted as well in the chat, or the chat did mention this. He did land in the stanchion on a block attempt and a fast break. Thought he might be hurt pretty bad, but he got back up, played, and then you could see the bruise under his eye, black eye, that he had. I believe it's his left eye. Yeah. That might be a factor for the next game. We'll see. But Jabari was kind of a mixed bag, had some good plays early on, but missed some shots, 3 of 9 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. Not an efficient night for him.
He was short on a couple as well. I mean, that was a theme across the board. So many of their shooters were just short on threes. And I thought what was really telling to me, Dave, the Rockets actually led late in the first quarter until, I want to say, early in the second. They were tied or slightly in front. But after getting off to a pretty good start, they were taking what I thought were some lazy shots across the board. Like, Amin had a good first quarter, but he started falling in love with, he took a couple of threes, a mid-range shot. They had an above the break from Josh Okogie. It just didn't feel like they wanted to aggressively attack the paint until they fell behind by 21 points. And that's why, I do put a little bit of an asterisk on the stats in this game, and that once the Jazz got up by 21 points, like, not to take anything away from the fight the Rockets showed, because, it would have been easy to sort of pack it in and say, not our night. But it's also a little bit easier to score when the opponent's just trying to not give up a back-breaking 3. And I think some of the stats the Rockets put up, especially in the second half of that game, were sort of just taking advantage of a Jazz team that knew, hey, we're 90% plus likely to win unless we do something catastrophically stupid. And so the Rockets took what was there. They fought back. But the Jazz knew they were in a good position as long as they made a couple of shots, and they ultimately did. So sorry for hijacking your point there, Dave, but I just think, some of the stats, I think it's a mixed bag, because even though overall the offensive stats would tell you it was a good night, I do think some of it was, the Rockets sort of, I don't want to say stat padding, because they did get to within 1 with like 4 minutes left in the game, but I do think some of those stats came easier than you would think just based on the game flow.
And we've talked about this before as well. And I'm just curious, if do you think that this team, the Rockets team, the way it's currently rostered and staffed, can they finish the year being the most efficient three-point shooting team? Because we've kind of wondered, will they regress? They're not matter of fact, they're one of the worst as far as volume. I don't want to say worst. I mean, the lowest volume that they right. In the league, but the most efficient. And tonight they just were not efficient from three-point range. And you take away that superpower of the rebounding, Adams being a big factor. Usually you expect Capella to help out a little bit. Tonight wasn't really it. Took Jae'Sean Tate coming in to kind of bring some of that back. You take away that superpower, that rebounding. I mean, you got an incredibly efficient game from Alperen Şengün. When the defense is not there and you don't have the rebounding advantage and your 3-point shooting's off, you can get a great nights from KD and Şengün. You're still going to lose the game. It's those things to me that are really like the MVP of the Rockets, the true superpower of the Rockets. That's how their offense is so good, and it all wasn't there tonight.
Yeah, I think we talked earlier in the game, like, even though KD and Şengün had really good statistical games, this is a game that reminds you that they don't have a full-blown MVP candidate, because when the rebounding isn't there to the extent that it normally is when they've had a top 2 offense for most of this season, and they're not able to put up enough threes at volume, where are they going to be able to generate enough offense? And I know the box will tell you that the offense was fine, that they lost the game defensively, but a lot of that came again, game flow in the fourth quarter, being able to get some very easy looks because the Jazz were just sort of wanting to hold on and giving up certain spots on the court to make sure they weren't giving up, threes to let the Rockets, get back into the game quickly. So I would urge anyone that's looking at the box score to consider the context of the game and when a lot of those points were put up. Because for the game as a whole, yeah, it was a game where without being able to hit threes at volume and without getting the extra effort plays, the second and third chances that you normally get when it's Steven Adams in tandem with Alperen Şengün attacking the glass. By the way, for whatever reason, Şengün on the glass has not been quite the same the last week and a half. Not sure why, but it's something that, I'm keeping an eye on. You're right. Like, they have a lot of good offensive pieces, but they don't have, that super transcendent piece to where they can overcome it. The transcendent piece is the offensive rebounding. When they don't have that, they have a lot of good pieces, but they don't have the one that you can say 100% is going to make you okay.
Yep, absolutely. That just real quick before we kind of close up, and we'll talk just about a question that was asked in the chat about Tari and DFS, if we know anything about when they'll be back.
Sadly,
Jazz
no.
Are definitely a rebuilding team. I expect them to tank near the end just to, avoid giving their pick to OKC, but they have some decent pieces. Keontae George didn't show it yesterday. He certainly did
today.
Tonight. Yeah, he looked a lot better tonight. Clayton is not a bad player. I think he's got a decent upside. Certainly
Ace Bailey.
I was blanking
tough
out for a
shot
second.
making.
Yeah, absolutely. That guy has a good future as well. And of course, Markkanen's really good. And they're missing Walker Kessler.
Your boy.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. They're not like in my top 5 in the West coming up or anything, but they're a tough out here and there when they bring it. And tonight they certainly did. I think they looked motivated after the loss. Let me just ask you what you think. I know I haven't heard anything about DFS. I'm not sure if you have either, but just when do we expect those guys back? I believe Tari how long's that been?
Yeah, it's been, so that was the Portland game. So that's been about 2.5 weeks. So I would think, they said 4 to 6 weeks. So I would think probably middle of next week. They have that stretch between the 6th and the 18th where they have only 2 games. So I would say middle of next week will be 4 weeks. That's when we'll get an update. And so my guess would be with Tari, assuming all goes well with the recheck, then I think they'll target that stretch right before Christmas when they have a lot of tough road games. They have the Nuggets in Denver. I don't think the add-on, the 15th, is realistic unless he starts ramping up. But I think the second game at Denver on the 20th and then the Lakers on Christmas, I think that stretch, and they have the Clippers in between there in LA, national TV game, I could see that being the target for Tari, who has some LA ties. So my guess is Tari comes back before DFS only because we're close enough to where I think we're now inside of definitely 2 weeks before there'll be a recheck. With DFS, and both of these guys, it should be noted, it's not going to be like a snap your fingers situation. They've been out long enough to where they're going to need a little bit of a ramp up period. My guess is that DFS, because he's coming off of a surgery and it's the lower leg, that's going to take him a little bit more time to sort of build up his conditioning. With Tari, maybe he's not all out sprinting, but within the oblique, I'm guessing he's able to somewhat stay in shape. So I would also think that the ramp up process is a little bit less with Tari. So just because A, we have a timeline with Tari, and B, it's not a lower leg, so he can stay in shape better. My guess is that Tari comes back a little bit sooner, but that's strictly a guess on my part. They've kept both of those close to the vest. Again, I haven't heard anything that sounds like there was a setback with DFS, and so hopefully he's back sooner rather than later. But if I had to bet money, just because there is a timetable, it's not a lower leg, there's no surgery, he can stay in shape, I would bet on Tari before DFS, and I think it's probably that road stretch before Christmas that they're sort of looking at internally.
Yeah, I'm surprised we don't have an update on DFS specifically. I wonder if we might want to, us behind the scenes, see if we can't figure something out on that. But go ahead.
And to be clear, like I see this on social media all the time. Like, why don't media people ask? They have asked,
yeah, exactly.
And then they say, he's working, and we'll let you know when we have an update. And I mean, what are you going to say at that point? Like, we can't make them say more than that. They're saying all they have to say, and I'm not accusing them of lying. They may not have more information. Like, I'm sure Ime's waiting to get clearance from the medical staff, and it's a frustrating situation. I get it, but A, we can't make them talk. B, we don't know that Ime 100%, has a timetable himself. So the questions are being asked, the answers are vague, and maybe the Rockets don't entirely know themselves. But the one peace of mind that I have, and I think fans should have it as well, this was not something that's a secret. The Rockets knew it when they signed DFS. He had the surgery in June, so they had the medicals. As long as there's no setback, and this is an issue that he played through the last couple of years, so I don't think it's some secret awful thing. No, it's a nagging issue, just like what Jayshawn Tate had, and it took Tate a little bit of time to sort of build himself back up, and I think the same thing is happening here with DFS to make sure that when he comes back, they don't have to pull back the way last week they had to send Tate to the G League to get him back into rhythm a little bit, because it's so tough coming off that ankle surgery. So yeah, the questions are being asked, and I don't think, at least from what I can tell, that there's anything huge that's being hidden or that there was a setback. I think it's just, any surgery to a lower leg is going to be, it's going to be time consuming. It's going to, because it's not just the surgery, it's not just the procedure, but it's also then building back up to where you're capable of running up and down an NBA court for, 30-ish minutes per night, and all that entails physically. So it's frustrating, but just between the nature of the injuries and the timetables we have, I would bet on Tari before DFS, but that's nothing but strictly my guess.
Ben, I just want to throw one last bonus question to you before we close up. I'll set the table here. Rockets play the Kings Wednesday. They play the Suns in Houston on Friday. That will be Dillon Brooks' homecoming. As we speak right now, Phoenix is just laying waste to the Lakers in LA. And this is the team that's above the Rockets. If the Lakers lose, and it looks very likely, they're down by 22 with 5:27 to go.
By the way, the Nuggets lost to the Mavs tonight, so keep that in mind for this weekend.
Another surprising one.
Because you have that Suns-Mavs back-to-back on Friday and Saturday,
They're missing Gordon more than – I'm just kind of surprised. I guess not surprised, but it hurts to lose that game because Gordon went out early on. But they're missing, I think, Aaron Gordon for sure. But Dillon Brooks is 15 of 25 from the field, has 33 points plus 24 in this game. Do you worry at all – and I'm saying this is a way off on the off topic a little bit here, because I do, the Lakers losing tonight is good news for us. Do you worry at all that that this trade raised the floor on the Suns, and you own that 27 and the 29 pick, and that, in the next few years that picks, maybe you hurt the prospects of it? What do you think?
I wouldn't go there, because I could honestly see it going the other way too, in that if they overachieve this year, it sort of suckers them into staying the course, and then all it takes, to me, the Suns, and I could be wrong, but they strike me as a team that, the sum is greater than the individual parts. They're well coached. I think the chemistry is really good, but sometimes that can be tough to sustain from year to year, especially when the West is as loaded as it is. And so I could see a world, not saying it for sure will happen, but I could see a world where they're worse than expected last year, because people don't, I guess, account for how much of this year was based on the chemistry. Now, it could be that some of these young players they have are better than we thought. And, the big question with the Suns, is Devin Booker a top, 15 to 20 player? Is he a top 30 to 35 player? Is he an all-star or an all-NBA guy? That's the big question, especially at the money that he's making now. And, if he's legitimately an all-NBA guy, then that sort of changes the long-term trajectory as well. I would say it's too easy. It's too early to say. But for me, I'm more focused on the younger guys. I think that's going to tell the tale for 27 and beyond, those picks. Booker and Dillon are good players with a lot of pride. It doesn't surprise me that after being sort of written off, they're off to a good start.
Yeah.
I'm more curious about Jalen when he comes back, because obviously we know Jalen has a ton of upside. They have a few other young guys as well. The kid from Duke that they drafted at 10 with the pick they got from the Rockets, chief among them. How did those guys fare? I think, what they have right now is a combination of, two veterans with a lot of pride in Booker and Dillon, and perfect chemistry, a friendly schedule to start the year. in terms of the sustainability, I think it's largely going to depend on, do those young guys take strides? And they might. It's possible. I just think it's still a little bit too early to say, but I will say I have a raised eyebrow on that a bit more than I did to start the year. Like, it has made me a little more uncomfortable to answer your question.
Gotcha. All good, brother. Man, I appreciate it, Ben. I know it sucks being up 11:15 at night to recap the Rockets falling in Utah, which,
well, I've got a question for you. Since we've stayed on,
Sure.
We'll still cut it before 30 minutes, but you asked me a bonus question. I'll ask you one.
Yeah.
So Mavs won at Denver tonight. That's night 2 of the back-to-back in Dallas. Phoenix night 1 in Houston. And you mentioned, as of now, the Rockets are slightly behind the Suns. So if Steven is still unavailable for half of a back-to-back, and seeing the last 2 days what a difference he makes, Dave, if it's your choice, do you play Steven against Phoenix, or do you save him for the Dallas game on the road?
Oh, that's a good one. I think you need him. Oh boy, with AD playing now, that's tough.
Yeah, I know.
Remember what happened? That's how this all started. I would probably say Dallas now, and I think about it. I was going to say Phoenix initially, but I think that's where this all started. I mean, AD just feasted on the Rockets' traditional lineup, and then they countered in that game with Adams, and it just was like a revolution. And I thought, well, this is a fluke, that nobody expected this. They'll adjust, blah, blah, blah. And here we are, almost a season later, and double big is still a thing. So I think that's probably a matchup where they would need him, assuming AD's playing healthy and everything. Yeah. I think you got to go.
And you're at home against the Suns, and so that could be a game where there should be a lot of juice in the arena. Dylan Brooks, his homecoming, and so maybe your stay ready guys like Capella and Tate can sort of help carry you a little bit in that one. Like, I'm torn because right now Dallas is certainly ahead in the standings, but for matchup reasons, I sort of look at it the same way. Like, to me, Dallas, if you're assuming they have AD and you don't have Steven, that could be a tough one, especially if it's night 2 of a back-to-back, and we saw how fatigued the Rockets were against the Jazz.
Yep, absolutely. But you're right. It's a very, very tough decision. I guess we'll see what they end up making. But I think you want Gafford on Şengün because he does well against Gafford. Yep. I think he would struggle more with AD. So we will see, man. I appreciate you doing this, man. Like I said, 11:15 at night again after losing to the Jazz. But we'll see hopefully better times after the Rockets play the
13-5.
Kings.
It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world.
Absolutely. And this is the first real disappointment. Everything else has been really close against very good teams. And then this loss is just one that, you can chalk up to a back-to-back or whatever you want to do. But I wouldn't panic at all about the Rockets. Appreciate all you guys. Thanks, everybody. We will see y'all on Wednesday. Have a good one.